Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of discussion today about the September 11th date and the calendar-based withdrawal. I think it's important to recall that the prior administration initiated a calendar-based leaving withdrawal from Afghanistan, and in fact, that calendar date is 1 week from tomorrow. So the current administration was, in a sense, boxed in by those negotiations with the Taliban that took place last year, and which, by the way, excluded the Afghan government. General McKenzie, you used a term earlier in your testimony, if a civil war ensues. Isn't there a civil war going on right at this very moment? There's no doubt that a civil war is going on now and will continue, is there?
Sorry, I'm probably not the best person to give you an answer to this. I would defer to the diplomats, but we have a constituted elected government in place in Afghanistan. And so that we have a legal authority in place. So I'm not sure that I would refer to what's going on right now as a civil war. Others might take a different view of that, but I'm not certain that I would refer to it in that way.
You don't think the Taliban is a viable insurgency that's fighting against the government and the government's reach into the provinces?
I think the Taliban certainly are militarily very capable. I do not know how much of the actual Afghan population they represent. Polling data would tell you it's a very low percent if you subjected it to an honest election, which I know would be very difficult to accomplish in Afghanistan. But I wouldn't confuse an insurgency, however capable and lethal, with a civil war.
Well, I'll turn the question around. We've been there 20 years. We've spent over $1 trillion, lost lives, tens of thousands of injuries, incredible support to the Afghan government. Why hasn't the Afghan government been able to take hold? And my understanding is, General, that the Taliban controls more land today than they did last year, and more last year than they did the year before. They are, in fact, winning. Why can't the Afghan government defend itself successfully?
So our principal objective in Afghanistan has been and will remain to prevent al-Qaeda and ISIS from developing attacks against our homeland and those of our...
I understand that, General. That's not my question. My question is, in your military judgment, why hasn't the Afghan government, with all the support that it's had from us, been more successful in beating back the Taliban, and when in fact over the last dozen years or so the Taliban has been making steady gains?
I believe that right now a rough stasis exists between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan forces. Taliban have access to offshore havens where they're able to reconstitute, where the government of Afghanistan can't reach, and that's always very difficult in a counterinsurgency fight when your opponent has the ability to do those things.
Well, I understand that, but it just seems like with all the advantages of the Afghan government, I'm just puzzled as to why they haven't, and you testified that you thought they had the support of the majority of the people, why they haven't been able to be more successful. General Townsend, we've talked a lot about the Chinese activity in Africa. You talked about it. The purpose appears to be both economic and military. My question is, do you discern any backlash in these African countries where the Chinese have made these big loans and big investments, and now the bills are coming due? Are the Africans having any second thoughts about their engagement with the Chinese?
Thank you, Senator. Actually, we do see some backlash. As you know, you have heard of the famous debt trap diplomacy that the Chinese have used. That has actually worked against their efforts in a lot of African countries. Our embassies have a very successful program where we now will review any contracts. We have a standing offer to review any contracts that these countries are going to undertake with China, to point out the inconsistencies, the potential pitfalls, and the differences often we find between the host nation language translation and the Chinese translation. I think this is a great effort by our Department of State to help these countries make informed decisions on their own. We see backlash, and we see it in the military sphere. Their equipment frequently breaks within a year or two. It's sitting rusting on the side of the airfield of the port. And their training has been described to me by one African leader as not much more useful than a Hollywood demonstration. So we are starting to see some pushback by African leaders on the Chinese.
Well, I think one way to look at it, and I've talked to leaders throughout Asia, is that we have allies, China has customers. And I think to the extent we can maintain those relationships with those African countries in the long run, I think they're going to prefer our model and our support. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.